Hey there, content heroes. So I did a live on Sunday where we talked about, based on a question that was asked in the Content Heroes Facebook community, about how to close that 1% gap between 99% committed and 100% committed. And so we went into depth about that and why that's important and how to make that change. But the conversation that happened from that, one of the big questions that came up was, how do okay, I get that I need to be committed, but how do I know what I want? Because the thinking is, I have to know what I want before I can commit to the thing that I want to do, right? So I want to dig into that here. First, I want to tell a story that relates to that. And so this was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. Before I started my business, I was working at this job, and I happened to be traveling for work, and I was in San Francisco. And just randomly, my friend Nathan was in San Francisco as well. He didn't live there, but he was traveling for work too, and we just happened to be there at the same time. And so, if you've listened to episode 45 of the Content Heroes podcast, I interviewed my friend Nathan Elson, and definitely go back and check that out because it's a fantastic conversation. But in this period of my life, well, really most of my life up until the last couple of years, I was the type of person that was just, constantly in this existential angst. Right? I always had this, every other week was a new existential crisis, and it usually centered around like, who am I? What does this all mean? All of those kind of big esoteric questions. And I remember having this conversation with him while we were in San Francisco, and I went through this whole diatribe about everything that I was going through, and I just realizing that like I didn't know who I was, and he, in very clear, pragmatic Nathan fashion, said to me, "You already know who you are." Right. So I'm the type of person, like I've done all these personality tests, and like all this stuff. I really geek out on all those things. Which, by the way, I'm an Enneagram 5 wing 4, which will make sense with this story. But he said, you already know who you are. You just don't accept who you are. And it was in that moment that I realized a few really key things. First of all, I knew that he was right. As soon as he said it, it was like, yeah, you nailed it. And so the next step was, okay, what is something about myself then that I know to be true that I don't accept? And for me in this moment, it was, I'm actually a really sensitive person. And I was, I've always been that sort of more analytical, intellectual type. All right. If you know anything about the Enneagram, this is way too much in the weeds, but if you know anything about the Enneagram, like that gap between the 5 and the 4 at the bottom, like that is like the abyss, and it's the gap between the head and the heart. And like I live there pretty much. But I can never reconcile how, I always thought of myself as this, really like smart, intellectual person, but then I could have these really irrational, just things where I would react with these huge emotions and just out of nowhere. I didn't know how to process that stuff. And I realized that I couldn't accept that part of me. But understanding that that's part of who I am, and really going on, like that sent me on a journey, especially over the last couple of years, to really, to not only understand who I am, but really start to understand the strengths of that and lean into that. I'm a person who has heart, and I care deeply about things. And the way that I would, kind of protect myself was to convince myself that I didn't care about things, and that I was, really apathetic about everything. But the reality is that's not who I am. And that when I'm operating from my heart, from a place where I can live in that gap and feel that tension of caring deeply, and staying engaged, but not being attached, like that is when I'm at my best self. That's when I make an impact, right? But it all came back to, I knew that deep down. I just couldn't accept it. And because I couldn't accept it, I was doing a lot of things to keep myself from leaning into that. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Right. So I would say that, or I would challenge you, if you're where you are, you're trying, you're struggling with commitment, and it's because your story is that, I don't know what I want. I would challenge you that you do know what you want. You're just not accepting what you want. You've got these voices in your head that are telling you that, it's not for you, that you can't have it, or that you're not good enough, or that it's not going to be worth it, or whatever those things are. You know what you want, right? Even if you don't know all the details, you at least have a sense of what you want your life to look like. You have a sense of the type of impact that you want to make, what you want to, the legacy that you want to leave behind in the world. You have a sense of that. But all of these stories are stopping that realization, that knowing, before it really gets started. And so instead, you're interpreting it as, I don't know what I want, but you really do. So the first thing I would say is sit down and start to do an exercise. A big thing that changed for me, you've probably heard me talk about this, is when I was at my job and I realized that it was no longer a good fit for me. I always say there are two questions that changed my life. And the first question was, I stopped asking what I want to do, like what job do I want? And I started to ask, what do I want my life to look like? And then the second question, which we'll get into another time, is, who do I need to be in order to make that life a reality? But the first question was, what do I actually want my life to look like? And I went through an exercise. If you read Pat Flynn's book, Will It Fly, about validating business ideas, I was reading that book at the time, and there's this exercise he called the airport test, where you go through and write down in great detail in 4 different categories, like what would have to be happening in your life 5 years from now to say that your life is going, like, everything's going amazing. And I started to do that, and I realized that I did know what I wanted, but up until that point, I didn't believe it was possible for me. And then the other realization was that I knew that the path that I was on was never going to take me to where I wanted to go. And that's when I walked in. I had that realization one afternoon, talked to my wife that night, which I was terrified of doing because we had a 1-year-old, and I was about to just like blow up our whole world. And she said, I've been waiting for you to come to this conclusion for a while. Do what you got to do. I fully support you. And I'm like, of course you have. You're amazing. But I walked in the next day and said, I'm done. And that's when I left my job without a plan and started my business. And so, but it all came back to, when I actually sat down and got that clarity, do that exercise, but be very aware of the voices that are the stories that are in your head while you're doing it. And you want to pay attention to the things you're telling yourself while you're doing this exercise, because that's going to reveal a lot. And if there are these stories about, I can't have that, or that's not possible for me, or it's not going to be worth it, or that's, blah, 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 like, those are the stories that you have to acknowledge and dismiss in order to get more clarity. And then once you have that clarity, that's where the commitment comes in to just start heading in that direction. When I left my job, I really had no idea what I was going to do. I knew that I didn't have a plan, and I really had no idea what I was going to do. And so, but I knew that the direction that I was heading was nowhere near the direction that I wanted to be going. And so that's where I made that change. And I said, I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know all the details yet, but I know that I have to course correct now, because the longer I go down this path, the harder it's going to be to get back over to where I really want to be going. And so you've got to get the clarity, pay attention to the voices, dismiss them, and then figure out which direction you're heading in, and just start going in that direction. And that's how you break down that interpretation, that story in your head of I don't know what I want, because you do know what you want. You just have to accept that it's for you, and that you can have it if you commit to it. So all that to say is taking that action will bring clarity, because when I did head down that path, I figured it out. Like the more action I took, the farther I went, the more clarity I got, and the more I course corrected, the more I got more accurate pinpoint of where I was heading. And it's always like, I'm still doing that. Like, it's still a journey, and I'm still figuring it out, and it can change over time. But that's how you start to create that life that you want, and have the impact that you want, and build the business that you want. So that action will bring clarity. So I hope that this was helpful for you if you're the type of person who've had that story in your head. And I also want to say that, that I am, part of that journey for me has come around to this like materialized as this mastermind that I'm starting in the next few weeks, called Fuel. And it's the only mastermind for business leaders who want to solidify authority in their niche with content. And I'm so excited about this. And this is what's the word? Like a nexus of all the things that have come together in my life through this process of gaining more clarity and course correcting and taking action and figuring things out. But I'm incredibly excited about this, because it's in line with who I am as a person, and how I want to help people, and the type of people that I want to help, and the community that I want to build and be a part of. So if you're interested in that and learning more about that, go to contentheroes.com/fuel to get on the wait list to find out when we start sending out some more information about that. So that's contentheroes.com/fuel. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in today. And until next time, go be a hero, everyone.